Hello, everybody. Welcome to the post-daily news update for Thursday, November the 11th. A shout out to all of the veterans out there. It is Veterans Day in the U.S., Remembrance Day here in Canada, and we are joined today by the great Nate Milton, who is with us from the NWA podcast, new show dropping this Saturday morning at postwrestling.com alongside Moderna Chris and Andrew Thompson that you can check out. We'll be talking about that. And he is the king of sport, here with us on the post-daily news update, making his arrival here on the Daily Show. Hello, Nate.
What's going on, Brother Pollock? I can't think of a better way to celebrate Veterans Day, celebrate Remembrance Day, than to bring on myself, the venerated Virginian veteran himself. Shout out to all the men and women in uniform. We appreciate your service. We appreciate what you do that allows us the freedom to get on these mics and pontificate about things like sports and wrestling. But I feel like it's been too long, John, since you and I have sat down one-on-one. At least it feels that way. So I'm glad we can make some time today to go through some of these stories.
Well, you bring up Virginia, and I'm sure you are aware of this, but it is kind of the center of wrestling over the next week, because we've got SmackDown at the Norfolk Scope, and then next Wednesday in is it the Chartway Arena that they're in for Dynamite? So for us outside of this is your backyard, Nate. How far apart are these venues? Like, this is the same market essentially. WWE and AEW are running within a couple of days.
Yeah, not too far away. Like the Scope, obviously a historic venue for wrestling in this area. But the Chartway Center, formerly known as the Ted Compton Center, it is the basketball arena for Old Dominion University. So it's not as big as the Scope, obviously, but it's still a pretty good-sized arena and not that far away from the Norfolk Scope. I was going to attend the Dynamite show. Unfortunately, some logistical things got in the way, but I'm hoping next time they come around, I'll be able to attend, and maybe they'll come over across this side of the water and do a show in Hampton, because I think the Hampton Coliseum is another venue that has some roots in this area, particularly when you talk about old WCW. So I think it's going to be a great night, particularly if what I think we all expect to happen at the main event of Full Gear happens, and you have kind of this coronation of Adam Page in his home state on this big Dynamite. So I won't be able to attend it, but I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Well, I wanted to start things off because on Friday, the pre-sale has already begun for WrestleMania 38 next April 2nd and 3rd. They're going, of course, to AT&T Stadium in Texas, but the public on sale is Friday morning. That all of the promotion has been geared around this week on television, and we haven't had a chance to discuss this, Nate, but what is your feeling on this? Is certainly the most ambitious of the two-night experiment for WrestleMania. I think that the two nights has been well received the last 2 years, but are you expecting like this is going to be a very in-demand show starting tomorrow?
I mean, Mania is always going to be an in-demand show just because of the name alone, John. Like, it's the Super Bowl. You know, the Super Bowl could have the two worst teams. It could have the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Washington football team, and it's still going to sell out because it's the damn Super Bowl. So I'm thinking that WrestleMania is going to be a hot ticket as usual, particularly as things kind of start to open up more as we are coming out of the other side of the pandemic, kind of, sort of. So I think it's going to be a big ticket. I'm still not sold. You know, you mentioned the two-night thing. I'm still not sold on 2 nights, but I think I'd rather have 2 nights at 5 hours versus 1 night at 7 hours. Like, just thinking about the economy of my time, John, I think I like that as opposed to some of those behemoth, massive WrestleMania shows that we got a couple years ago.
Yeah, that I mean, I've been to some of those marathon shows, and just going back to the one a few years ago at MetLife Stadium, it was like by the time people got, like, that audience peaked with Kofi Kingston winning the title, and we still had many matches to go. And, you know, by the time it got to like Becky's big coronation, that was an exhausted crowd leaving MetLife Stadium that night. And I think it's tough on the performers. Like, it's your biggest show of the year, and your audience, like, you're talking about some people that have been in their seats for upwards of 7 hours by that point. I think this is going to be a monstrous set of shows from the company. But as we are looking this far out, Like, what are the big cards to play, Nate, for WrestleMania? It would seem that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar would be earmarked. But outside of that, like, this is one where they have had such a reliance each year on going back to the past, but those names are starting to move on and not be available at the same rate they were over past years.
Yeah, and it's a situation that we've talked about for a few years now, and it's like now it's starting to catch up to them. The more you lean on some of these stars of the past, the less returns you get each time they come back. And so I think Roman and Brock is a sure thing. In terms of Big E, because that's the one that interests me the most, John. Like, A, will Big E still be the champion? Like, hopefully by then. But B, who do they put him in against? And I don't know. Like, is that where we get the proverbial big meaty man slapping meat, John Pollock? Like, if we're gonna double down on these old guys coming back and we got Roman and Brock on one side, are we gonna go Big E and Goldberg on the other? And I think that could be an interesting match. I don't know if that's a match I'd put on WrestleMania though. So for me, that's going to be the most interesting question is, what do you do with Big E? Like, will he still be your champion by the time we get to WrestleMania? And B, what do you do with him? Like, what's the feud heading into that show?
Can you still put Cena in that kind of a role?
Ooh, I mean, that'd be an interesting matchup. I don't know if that's what I'd like to see though. Like, I think
it's sort of where it was a very successful program, I think, with Reigns leading up to SummerSlam, but it almost feels like you're pretty much telling people like what the story is here from the odds. Like, this is clear what Cena's role is. And if you feel like you can get several of these attraction style matches for Cena, I don't know if I'd want to do them just back to back of just feed him to the champion you are pushing. But I mean, you look up and down this roster way, Nate, is that you can choose.
I take that as a compliment.
It's not like you have that glaring option that, yes, this is the person that's been kept separate from Big E. That would be a great culminating program for WrestleMania. But I think most people are hoping that Big E is, positioned very strong come next April, unless he meets his demise in some event on the way up.
That's my thing. Like, I think in terms of Big E's title reign, like, I think so far it's been successful, at least for me as a viewer. But will the company have the patience to let the story of his title reign play out? And also, like, can they be patient with his feuds? Like, are they going to burn through so many of these first-time matchups so quickly with Kevin Owens, with Seth Rollins, with the rematch, the match with Drew McIntyre? Like, are they going to run through these feuds so quickly that by the time we get to Mania, we have to lean on a Goldberg, we have to lean on somebody like a Cena to come in, because we've beaten everybody that is current on the roster and we need to go back to the past?
It's always Braun Breaker. You can always go to that one. So there you go. It's the last time they ran AT&T Stadium, it was 2016 for WrestleMania 32. The announced crowd was 100,000. The turnstile count, as Brandon Thurston had investigated, was about 80,000 right there. So I am expecting, Nate, that we will get an announced combined attendance of 200,000 between both nights. I am sure that this is going to be promoted and will be between both nights of the tickets sold and the gate. This is going to be the biggest weekend in the company's history.
Yeah, not even a question. And it's not even a reflection of how good or bad the programming is. It's almost like it's McDonald's at this point. It's Coca-Cola. It's the Super Bowl. It's the name that sells. It's Nike. Like, Nike can put out some trash shoes, John Pollock, and they'll still sell 1 million pairs because of the name. And so, yeah, I don't doubt that WrestleMania weekend will be extremely financially successful for the company. The question is, will the show they give us merit all of that money, John? And that's yet to be seen.
Where is your status for SoFi Stadium in 2023? Is that still on the itinerary?
Oh, it definitely is. And it's not even because of the company. It's more so the fact that, coming out to LA and reconnecting with Marcus Vanderberg and hanging out with you and Way, hopefully, and just the stuff surrounding WrestleMania, I think, is what is more intriguing to me than whatever card they can throw together. Because I don't have much faith in WWE creative at the moment, John, but I do think that there is still something special and there is still something meaningful about WrestleMania weekend.
Well, if we can coordinate it, I think a live Kings of Sport and a live post wrestling Q&A, I think the people would demand it, Nate. I think they would.
Got to give the people what they want, John Pollock.
NXT on Tuesday night, they did 603,000 viewers, a 0.15 in the demo. That would be 196,000 in 18 to 49. So they were 36th on cable. The demo number was almost identical to the week prior. The audience, it wasn't a giant decrease, but it was technically their lowest since September the 7th, which would have been the last week under the old black and yellow era of NXT. So, Nate, we have not discussed your thoughts. We have had now over 2 months since the revamp of NXT into 2.0. What's working? What's not working for you?
Yeah. So, we transitioned from the Wiz Khalifa era to the Wale era. And thank you. I think that at some point in your life, John, you just have to realize some things aren't going to be for you. I think that's a valuable lesson for everybody out there. Everything is not for everybody. And after a month or so, John, I realized NXT 2.0 is just not for me. No disrespect to the men and women on the roster. I think there's some real talent there. You mentioned Braun Breaker. Like, that's a incredibly stupid name that they put on this man, but I think he's got all the talent to be able to make that transition to the next level. I think Odyssey Jones is somebody who intrigues me in terms of what they could do with that brother. I think my favorite person, John, and I don't know why. Sometimes you just like a character for irrational reasons, but Tony D'Angelo, I know it's like a stupid, dated, stereotypical caricature, but it just hits me, John. Like this guy that supposedly is in a mafioso style family has to wrestle on his part-time, on his days off to support the family. Just like, hey, forget about it. I didn't see nothing, man. I'm Tony D'Angelo. It's like, I shouldn't intellectually like this character, John, but he brings me so much joy. So, like, there are times, like, I don't watch NXT anymore, but I do go back and watch the clips of, like, Tony D'Angelo or see what Braun Breaker did. Like, because there are certain people on the roster that I'm interested in, but I just don't have the time to sit down and commit to a show that is not geared for me anymore.
Yeah, it's certainly the two names that everyone is going to be focused on. I mean, they just did a dark match together at the SmackDown tapings last Friday, and that is Johnny Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly, both of whom have deals coming up in the month of December. And I mean, for them, it's really going to be a decision of, like, what is our ceiling in this company? Because in NXT, it's very clear what the roles are and who the priorities are going to be and how satisfied you are being at that level. Like, it really is kind of, are we main roster ready or are we not? And we have to make those decisions because those are two quality talents that have still plenty of quality years ahead of them. Even though in the NXT system, it's like they're kind of being presented as the older guard that is there to get the younger talent across as the now.
And NXT has just always had this weird relationship with the main roster, so to speak, John, and it doesn't make any sense to me. I know we'll probably talk about Keith Lee in here in a little bit, and it's like, why would you change what works? Like, I know you have to make little adjustments here and there and tweak a character when they make that transition, but it'd be like if you had a sports team, and let's say this is the Blue Jays, John Pollock. I'll bring this analogy close to home, and NXT is your AAA affiliate, and you got a guy that's a great hitter, right-handed hitter, can hit for power, can hit for average, just the next big thing, can't miss prospect. But as soon as you bring him up to the Jays, you make this guy bat lefty and then wonder why he's struggling. And it's like, why is there such a disconnect between what you've established in NXT and what you do on the main roster? And I think they've done a disservice to a lot of the talent, in terms of guys and girls who just couldn't make that transition. I think it's not entirely their fault. It's more on the company because you had these people under contract for at least 2-3 years, sometimes, 6-7 years in some cases with these performers. And this is how you chose to present them when they got to Raw, when they got to SmackDown. So I just have never got it, John. Like, it's not like this is somebody you're pulling off the street or somebody you're bringing from the independents. This is somebody you had in-house. So why is it so difficult to make that move with that person. It's just never made sense to me.
Yeah, it seems like it has been it's lost its identity in some ways. That I think the ripple effect of the head-to-head battle on Wednesdays has left, like, NXT was a complete casualty of that head-to-head fight, and now it's going in such a different direction that isn't really in sync with, I think, the audience that is seeking that level of product in WWE. Like, you are going to satisfy a main roster audience with a certain presentation that they are that they enjoy. But I think when you're going to the NXT level, that's, I mean, it's like a cold shower for these people that you have been, this brand had been raised on this style of product, and boom, we are now just completely overhauling it. And I think it's been, I mean, in the long term, it's going to be determined based on, can we get marketable characters onto our main roster? And I do think that there's going to be less of a period of time where once a character gets going, we want to mark this as a success, and we're going to see a lot of these names popping up, and probably to varying degrees of success on the main roster.
And I think NXT 2.0, if we're looking at it just as a program, John, I think it works if you pull a Doctor Strange and put it in its own pocket universe. Like, if you could divorce it from the rest of the goings on with the WWE and have this world where we've got Braun Breaker, we've got was it Joe Gacy, and we've got Toxic Attraction, and we've got Tony D'Angelo, and we've got all these Lash Legend, we've got all these characters that can fit in this world, but we're not putting them in the context of the larger WWE universe, so to speak. Like, I think it could work if we're doing something different and zany and offbeat, but that's not what this is. You know, they're telling us that this is the next step before these are superstars you're going to see on Raw, on SmackDown, at WrestleMania. And so if this is the future, then you've got to make it a more seamless transition. And thus far, they haven't done that.
So the WWE cuts that went down last week, we're not going to go through, each one here, but I did want to kind of pick your brain of the ones that you think are the best equipped for success given the current landscape outside of WWE. So to refresh the names that were announced last week: Frankie Monet, Scarlett Bordeaux, Ember Moon, Oney Lorcan, Nia Jax, Eva Marie, Harry Smith, Karrion Kross, Keith Lee, B-Fab, Lindsay Dorado, Grand Metalik, Jesse Kamea, Trey Baxter, Zeta Ramir, Katrina Cortez, Jeet Rama, and Mia Yim. 18 in total, Nate. So if you are looking at that list, it's going to be unfortunate because there's just such an enormous amount of talent that is now classified as free agents that a lot of these names are not going to end up with contracts at the end of it. But as you are looking at supply and demand, who are the names that automatically jump out at you?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a crowded free agent market, so to speak, with not only those names, but also like the releases we had about a month and a half ago, and also what's going on with ROH. So like it's been a rough few months in terms of, people's employment statuses. And so I think, I'll give my personal answer first, and then, the answer. I'm going to speak with my heart first, John, and then I'll speak with my head, because for my heart, there's one name that stands above all that created the biggest sense of loss for me when I found out this individual was cut. It created the most despair for me, John Pollock. You could say it created a hole in my heart. And that's when Nia Jax got cut, man. Because I felt that on a spiritual level. I know that's not the popular answer, but I love me some Nia Jax. And I think that's somebody who worked in the WWE who's probably not going to work anywhere else. Like, I hope she can get work. I hope she's happy. I just hope Nia Jax is happy with whatever she does. But I think that's probably the extent of her wrestling, unless she comes back to the WWE, which is always a possibility given the family ties. But in terms of if I'm a promoter, if I'm somebody that owns one of these companies, who am I looking at? It's Keith Lee all the way. Like, I think Keith Lee is the top draft pick of this class, so to speak, because he's somebody who should have been a star in the WWE. He's somebody who worked in NXT. He's somebody who, when we saw him at Survivor Series 2019, John.
Yeah.
Like show up and get in the ring and stand face to face with some of those guys. Like, this is a guy that clicks and connects. So Keith Lee and also Mia Yim would be at the top of my list, because I think Mia Yim is fantastic. And I know, like, AEW is like the trendy landing place, but honestly, if I'm Impact Wrestling and I want to get back in the game, I might throw some money towards Keith Lee and Mia Yim, because Mia Yim has already had that relationship with Impact in the Knockouts division. And Keith Lee, to me, is a guy day one who walks into that company and changes things. He gives that company some gravitas just by him being there. It probably won't happen, but, you know, that's where I would like to kind of see, because I think that'd be intriguing. In terms of some of the other names you mentioned, I think a guy like Karrion Kross can find his way. Scarlett, of course. Like, I could see them, you know, landing in the NWA or something like that. But it's just wild to me, John, that, and maybe I'm thinking back with rose-colored glasses, it used to be we get that one release cycle after WrestleMania every year. And now in the last 16 months or so, we've had 3 rounds of cuts from this company. And it just doesn't feel right, John. And I know, you know, there's no room for morals in business and there's no room for emotions in business, but to me, it just doesn't feel right for a company that is crowing about all this money, all this revenue. But you've made 3 rounds of cuts in the middle of a pandemic over the last 16 months. It just doesn't feel right.
And they're often rewarded for it too. I mean, it's a very, I mean, if you are looking at what is the reaction going to be from analysts and from Wall Street, I mean, they are just looking at slashing expenses. It's very heartless when you look at it. And I think it hit people the most last year during the initial wave, like these people that worked with you through a pandemic that made sure your television got to air. It was, you know, that was, if you needed a wake up call, many people did not, but if you did, that was it. And now it has become such a regular occurrence that, you know, there has to be that side of you that you sign a contract and will I see the 3 or 5 years of this deal? Will I see it to the end? And any Friday could be another Black Friday for them. So, it's going to be very intriguing to see who lands where and what the priorities are going to be from other companies of what they're looking for. If you, just to put a bow on this conversation, if you are Tony Khan and you have the roster that you have, what would you say are the factors that you are looking at when a round of these cuts come about? It's certainly not a case of them in need of any specific one person, I would say, but like, what are you looking at as that's going to jump out, that is going to gain your attention if you're AEW, that yes, that is the person we are going to aggressively go after?
I think you're looking for one of two things, John. You're either looking for somebody who can go in the ring and has a name that we can put in a featured spot right away. So Keith Lee would kind of fill that bill. Or you're looking for somebody that is young and was mishandled by the WWE. You know, I'm thinking of, in terms of somebody currently on the AEW roster, like Tay Conti is kind of that mold, where she has a lot of potential, but for whatever reason, it didn't work with NXT. And, you know, she might not have the biggest name coming out of that class, but she's somebody that you can bring in and grow up through the system in AEW. So I think you either go for that big dollar free agent that has the name that can bring eyeballs to the screen, or you go for, you know, kind of the team building approach where, you know, this person might not have the biggest name, but, you know, they're 25, 26 years old. This is somebody we can work with for a few years.
Let's just move on. I want to get some of your thoughts on the build up to Full Gear. We appear to have the entire card now with 10 matches listed. So quickly going through it, we have Kenny Omega and Hangman Page for the AEW title, Britt Baker versus Ty Conti for the women's title, Bryan Danielson and Miro in the finals of the title eliminator tournament, the Inner Circle against Men of the Year and American Top Team, including Dan Lambert in the Minneapolis Street Fight, Lucha Brothers defending the AEW tag titles against FTR, MJF versus Darby Allin, Eddie Kingston against CM Punk, Falls Count Anywhere match, Christian Cage and Jurassic Express taking on Adam Cole and the Young Bucks, Pac and Cody Rhodes teaming against Malachi Black and Andrade El Idolo, and the buy-in will see Jamie Hayter team with Nyla Rose against Hikaru Shida and Thunder Rosa. What have your thoughts just been in terms of this as a follow-up to All Out, which many have looked at as the most well-received AEW pay-per-view, not just commercially as their most bought pay-per-view, but also in terms of quality. That's a very big show that they are following here in November.
Yeah, like All Out, I had a chance to do the review of that the day after with Stephanie Chase. And in the moment, I said that was like one of the best shows of the past decade. And maybe I was a prisoner of the moment. But looking back, John, I still stand by that statement. Like that show still resonates. And so you got a tough act to follow with Full Gear. And I will say, if we were asking about my enthusiasm for this card maybe a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I'd be like, it's going to be good because most AEW shows are good, but I just don't have that enthusiasm for it. But they've done a really good job of building up your main story with Kenny Omega and Adam Hangman Page. Like now they've got it to the point where you want to see this man overcome all these obstacles and win the title. Something like Eddie Kingston and CM Punk, which didn't have the long build of a Kenny Omega and an Adam Page, they microwaved it. But sometimes a microwave dinner can work for you, John Pollock. Sometimes you get that hungry man TV dinner with the ribs and the mashed potatoes and a little brownie, and you just put it in the microwave for 3.5 minutes, and it comes out perfect. And I think that's what Eddie Kingston and Punk is. Like, I am so excited for that match and the way they pull that off. I think, all the tag matches, and the multi-man matches will be fun. Bryan Danielson and Miro is a match that I'm intrigued by, John, because I think you could go one of two ways with that. I think most people assume Hangman's going to win the world title, and so then you can either go Miro, who's been doing some great work lately, versus Hangman, or you can go Bryan Danielson versus Hangman, which I think could be a really interesting feud that is not based on hate or animosity, but based on like, hey, I want a shot at this dude. I respect this dude. Let's just go out here and wrestle. So AEW has put themselves in a position to have another good show. I'm not going to say it's going to top All Out, but I think it's going to be a really solid show. Not a whole lot of filler on this card. I think maybe the one match that I think could be seen as filler is the stuff with the Inner Circle and American Top Team. And that's no disrespect to anybody in the match, John. It's just when I look at the rest of the card, I think that's the match that might have a bit of a lull emotionally, but even that's not going to be bad. So I'm excited for Full Gear and maybe even more so than that, I'm excited for that follow-up and what they do with Adam Page. Now that the chase is over, how do we tell the story of Hangman as our top guy?
Yeah, and I think AEW has been very good with these pay-per-views that you have a lot of elements coming out of a show that drive you to television, and ready-made after this pay-per-view, Nate, is in theory we will have the next title match based on the eliminator and the result of the main event, so you know what the direction is, and probably for a big TV special as opposed to holding off on that title match till like their next pay-per-view will not be for several months.
Yeah, I think what is it? They've got the big special coming up on, is it TBS or TNT?
TNT, that's right. They've got that that rumored Saturday night special in January. That's where I do the title match, and I think that's a perfect way to kind of draw eyeballs to that program. And it's a really good problem to have, John, that there's so many intriguing matchups you can put together with Hangman Page. Miro, Danielson. Of course they're going to do the Omega rematch probably at some point. I think Punk and Hangman could be fun. I think, Powerhouse Hobbs, the guy we talk about a lot on the NWA podcast, like that's not a pay-per-view match with Powerhouse and Hangman, but that could be a really great Dynamite main event one week. So like, I think there's a lot you can do with Hangman Page as your champion. Tonight on Impact, they have quite a bit announced. It's going to be Matt Cardona, Eddie Edwards, and W. Morrissey in a triple threat match. Minoru Suzuki against Caleb with a K. Rocky Romero, who's on everyone's TV this week, against Rohit Raju. Rosemary and Havoc against the Undead Bridesmaids. Mercedes Martinez versus Madison Rayne. And on Before the Impact at 7 Eastern, it is Savannah Evans taking on Rachel Ellering. How much Impact are you catching these days, Nate?
I'm catching Impact in spurts, John Pollock, and listening to reviews, reading reviews, and then going back and watching the good stuff. I'm really excited to see Suzuki. Yeah, like the fact that like he's getting this, I don't want to say farewell tour, but he's getting his flowers right now on this latest run, John. I think that's a really cool thing for Minoru Suzuki. Mercedes Martinez is somebody that I have been a fan of for a long time. And, you know, we talked about NXT and people that they might have missed on. Like in terms of that transition to the main roster, I think Mercedes Martinez could have been a big addition to that women's division on either Raw or SmackDown. And they fumbled the ball with Mercedes. And so I'm glad that she's back in Impact. And like this Knockouts division, I don't think enough can be said about the depth of the Knockouts division. I love, Mickie James coming back. So I keep up with Impact. We talk a lot on the latest edition of the Nubian Wrestling Advocates about Moose as champion and our thoughts on whether that was a good move or not. But Impact's got a lot going for it. It's just on the pecking order of my priority. When I look at my week, John, I don't have time to sit around and watch a full episode start to finish, but the stuff that I hear is good. I do go back and watch.
And I think you summarized the dilemma that a lot of fans have, that we talk about all this great talent that is out there. And yeah, it would be great to see Impact stock up and create more places than just WWE and AEW. But with the big two churning out so much just to keep up with those two products, hell, keeping up with WWE a week. Like how many programs do you follow that require 3 to 5 hours of your time every week, not even taking into account NXT or pay-per-views? Throw on AEW and you're asking fans to follow more products on top of that. Like there is only so much time. That does not, there's a finite amount of free time for people and all of this programming that is out there. So I think that is going to be a continued story of the supply and demand that comes with all of this. You mentioned it. The NWA podcast, the Nubian Wrestling Advocates, are back Saturday morning at postwrestling.com. What is on tap for this month's episode?
Yes, it's a new day. Yes, it is. New day for the program, but the same attitude, John Pollock. This latest episode features myself, of course, the legendary Moderna Chris, and Andrew Thompson, the youngest in charge. And it's a really fun episode where we get to sit down with Phil Lindsay of Bleacher Report and the Grapsity podcast. And we just kind of talk about the news of the month. And we talk about, ROH. We talk about Moose winning the Impact World Championship. We talk about Keith Lee. Like we do a lot of discussion about Keith Lee. And full disclosure, like the episode that we're going to release this weekend was recorded before the releases. So there is a lot of talk about the Bearcat gimmick and the mishandling of Keith Lee on the main roster. We talk a lot about Leo Rush and just how great it is to have him back in AEW. And that match last night, John, I know you guys talked about it on Rewind to Dynamite. Like,
it's terrific.
I am so excited to see what the ceiling is for Leo and Lee Moriarty and Dante Martin. Like, I think there's a lot of good things going on in AEW right now. So we talk about that on the program. It's just a fun conversation about the last month of pro wrestling and how we all come and look at it through the lens of our Black fandom, John Pollock. So it's going to be a fun episode with Phil Lindsay. Y'all definitely should check it out. It's very Andrew heavy, like for the first time. And like unlike Vince McMahon, John Pollock, it didn't take us long to realize who the young talent was. And so we were like, why should we stifle Andrew and just have him in the news segment? Let's have Andrew on for the whole show. So Andrew Thompson is getting the shine. He's getting that push. He's grabbing the brass ring and he stays on with us for the whole show. So it was a fun show to record and I hope everybody enjoys listening to it.
Always a must listen each month here at postwrestling.com. I look forward to checking out the latest edition with all four of you chatting the latest news. So that can be found this Saturday. It will be on the free Post Wrestling feed. Check all of that out. And you can follow this man at N8 MOZAIK and give them some Kings of Sport love. Nate, where can they go?
Yes. Thank you, John Pollock. Yeah. The Kings of Sport still going strong. 3 episodes away from 300 episodes.
Ooh.
And so, but for anybody that's followed the show, we've been taking these long hiatuses ever since Marcus left the territory. And so I don't know if we're going to drop the 300th episode at the end of the year or if we're going to hold off on that momentous occasion for our first show in January of 2022. But we've got a lot of things up right now on the Kings of Sport Patreon. Patreon.com/the Kings of Sport. $5 gets you in the door, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to pay more, I won't stop you. But you can find a lot of audio and video content in terms of the world of sports, pro wrestling. We have some MCU reviews up there, political shows. If you're into that kind of thing, they're up there. Andrew Thompson and Chris Ely are going to be providing more content on the Patreon in the coming months. And the latest thing that is up on the Patreon, John Pollock, is something near and dear to my heart. It is a show talking about my Atlanta Braves, John Pollock, the champions of the world of professional baseball, like the entire world, John Pollock. There's no baseball team in the world that is better than my Atlanta Braves. And so I had to get on the microphone and talk about my long-suffering Atlanta fandom. And so that was a fun show. So that's available now if anybody wants to check that out. Again, patreon.com/Kings of Sport. We definitely appreciate the support. And I hope you enjoy it because I have a good time, whether it's talking with Chris or talking with Steve Willie. We've done a show, TDT Talks. Like anytime we get up to our own shenanigans on the Patreon, it's a good time.
I know Otis Nixon would have been proud of this year's effort from Atlanta. So
there was a tear in Terry Pendleton's eye, John Pollock, with a tear in his eye.
Well, everybody, that's going to wrap up the post-daily news update. But Way and I will be back on Friday. We'll take a deeper look at Full Gear and a crazy weekend ahead of a big show. So check all of that out. You can subscribe, youtube.com/postwrestling, like the video, subscribe, and you can get the audio version, patreon.com/postwrestling. That is it for us. Thank you for listening.